Welcome to Prime 9, the countdown show that covers the very best in baseball. Guaranteed to start arguments, not end them. This week it's the 9 greatest managers of all time. Why 9? That's baseball. 9 players, 9 innings, Prime 9.
Great year, boys!
For this show, success over a long period of time is our main criteria.
For the first time, a team has hoisted 5 consecutive World Championship flags.
But with that said, the man who managed more years and won more games than anyone did not make our list.
It's up to you boys to show him that he's all wrong.
Cornelius Alexander McGillicuddy, better known as Connie Mack, managed 53 years in the majors and won more than 3,700 games. But he lost almost 4,000, the most all time. Our point is, there are many great managers who led their teams, but only an elite few can crack our list. So let's begin with number 9 on Prime 9. In 2009, Joe Torre led the Dodgers to the playoffs for the 2nd straight season.
Oh, that stuff is cold!
That gave him 14 consecutive postseason appearances as a manager, tied for the most all-time.
There you go. Make him dig it out.
That's quite a contrast to how Joe's career first began. In his 18 seasons as a player, Torre was a 9-time All-Star and a league MVP, but he never reached the playoffs.
Good boy, Dougie.
His role as player-manager for the Mets in 1977 was the springboard for his next career.
I feel I've had enough major league experience and under enough managers and playing for different type ball clubs, and hopefully I can have the respect of the players.
Hit another one the same way.
But after managing 3 different teams over the course of 14 seasons, he still had yet to reach the World Series.
He got tired of seeing himself when they show the longest tenure without being in the World Series, and his picture was right there.
So when Joe was hired to manage the Yankees in '96, the decision was met with a firestorm of criticism.
People were wondering why George Steinbrenner would pick this loser to manage his New York Yankee ball club.
Turned out they were wrong, for it was a perfect fit.
He was very calming, and he did such a great job of controlling the media. He reflected all the questions on him, and he kept them off of the players, and it made it a lot easier to play in New York, and everybody respected that.
And in his first season at the helm, Joe finally reached the promised land.
The New York Yankees are going to the World Series!
The Yankees went on to win an incredible 4 titles in 5 years.
For the 26th time in franchise history, they are the world champions.
4 World Series is something that not a lot of managers have done, but even the ones who have done it, they didn't have to go through all these rounds of playoffs. What Joe Torre's Yankees did was so special.
And because of those multiple rounds, Joe now has the distinction of winning the most postseason games in history. Remarkable, considering it took him more than 30 years to experience a fall classic. That was not the case with our man at number 8. George "Sparky" Anderson was a coach for the San Diego Padres when the Cincinnati Reds hired him as manager in 1970. That October, he was in the World Series.
Sparky just had that wonderful ability to relate to people.
Come on, Jimmy! Come on, Stevie!
John, I'm not second guessing. I'm correcting something.
The thing that amazed me about him is his ability to mesh all the egos that were on that club with a single goal in mind, and that is to win.
And when he did, driving the Big Red Machine to back-to-back World Series titles in 1975 and '76.
The Cincinnati Reds win the World Series in consecutive years.
This club here is the greatest club that's come down the pike for one reason. They got more class than any other baseball team has ever had.
In his 9 seasons at the helm, the Reds averaged 96 wins a year, thanks in small part to Sparky's hands-on approach to his bullpen.
I'll keep contact with you as we go, but just get them prepared, okay?
Sparky invented the modern-day way to handle pitchers. As soon as a pitcher got into trouble, Sparky was out on the mound hooking him out of the game. So he became known as Captain Hook.
Sparky Anderson, he is not hesitating.
Nice ball game. Go on in. Hell of a game.
His philosophy from a pitching perspective was, if you can take me into the 7th inning with a lead,
I appreciate you going out here today.
I will not let you lose that game.
Come 1979, Sparky took his hook and winning ways to Detroit.
He don't want to walk you.
And 5 years later, he became the first manager to win a World Series title in both leagues.
Mr. President, I know you love those Cubs, but if you knew around these Tigers, you'd love them more.
Sparky won more than 2,000 games in his 26 seasons and is now enshrined in the Hall of Fame.
He is without a doubt one of the all-time great managers in the history of the game.
Welcome back to Prime 9, featuring the greatest managers of all time. You've heard the case for both 9 and 8. We now continue with number 7.
You do it again and I'll knock you right in your nose. I didn't touch you. You pushed your finger. I did not.
Earl Weaver's legendary tantrums led to an American League record 97 ejections, but it's not what landed him on this list.
You are.
For that, we go back to the middle of the 1968 season.
Can I get just the 2 managers for a color shot?
That's when Earl became manager of the Orioles and incredibly took the team to the World Series in each of the next 3 years.
You realized one thing about Earl. He wanted to win. That was the most important thing to him.
And he did win it all in 1970.
Winning the 1970 World Series, that's got to be, the standout. Winning is what it's all about.
And the Orioles responded to Earl's single-minded charge, winning more games in the 1970s than any other American League team.
Earl Weaver was head and shoulders above any other manager in the game of baseball at that time.
What made Earl unique was that he didn't follow the baseball Bible. He defied the norm, and it worked.
There's the sly fox. Don't ever count him out.
He had philosophies about the game that he stuck with. He didn't like giving outs away, bunting. He did not like to make a good hitter have only one pitch to swing out on the hit and run.
Weaver believed that fundamentals were the most important advantage they could have. And so while other teams were taking batting practice by the hour after hour, the Orioles had everybody over there with Weaver screaming at them about which base to cover every bunt play, every pickoff play, every cutoff play.
Earl's unique approach became known as the Oriole Way, earning him 1,480 wins and beloved status in Baltimore.
The fans have stayed to honor a man who has become an absolute legend.
I wouldn't go anywhere but Baltimore because I was treated so well there, and the organization was such a class organization. It was a great marriage.
Only 2 men who managed one team their entire career have more wins than Earl, and one of them checks in at number 6. For 23 years, Walter Alston was at the Dodgers' helm, and despite his success, he often doesn't get the credit he deserves.
People say, well, why is Walter Alston overlooked when you don't put him in a class with Casey Stengel and some of those types? I think probably that happens because he was quiet, he was very unassuming.
A dignified man of few words, Alston took a studious approach to the game.
He just methodically managed the baseball game.
Know your team as well as you can and go to your best judgment. That's the only thing that you can do.
He did know the game of baseball, and I thought he was a fair man, very strong man. You didn't want to mess with him.
We knew that we didn't want to make him mad, though, because I did see him challenge the entire bus one time, and he was looking right at Frank Howard as he was chewing us all out. Frank Howard was 6'7", 280 pounds, and he said, if anybody doesn't like it, just step outside. And he walked out of the bus, and he waited for us. Nobody moved.
In 1955, Walter turned the bums into heroes when he led Brooklyn to its only title.
And these Dodgers at last are world champions.
3 years later, the Dodgers made their historic move to Los Angeles, and Alston's steady hand helped keep the focus on baseball.
I can't say how I'm going to like L.A. because we haven't been there yet. But I think my main concern is to have a good ball club, and things are pretty nice wherever you go if you can win.
And that he did. earning 3 more titles in Los Angeles and finishing his career with 7 pennants and more than 2,000 wins.
All Bedlam breaks loose on the field as the jubilant Dodgers try to reach Koufax.
I think in a lot of ways, Walter was underrated. He was probably a lot better manager, had a lot better strategy than people really believe.
But Alston was very strong in his own beliefs, self-confident in his ability to lead the team, and I think that's what really made him a great manager.
Welcome back to Prime 9, featuring the top 9 managers of all time. Joe Torre and George Sparky Anderson kick things off, followed by Baltimore's Earl Weaver and the Dodgers' Walter Alston, which means it's time for number 5.
If players and other aspiring managers want to take note of what a true Hall of Famer is all about, look no farther than Bobby Cox.
Bobby first came to the Braves in '78, inheriting a team that had just finished 40 games under 500. He got them to 500 by the early '80s, but that's when Cox moved to Toronto, where he would lead the Blue Jays to their first division title in 1985.
The Blue Jays have won it! They've won the Eastern Division Championship!
He returned to the Braves in October of that year, but this time as general manager.
I won't miss the dirt and the dirty uniforms and arguing with umpires, paying fines, and such things like that.
But he did miss it. And after building a strong nucleus as the GM, Cox returned to the bench in 1990, where he soon began an historic string of success.
Let the celebrating begin, folks. 14 consecutive division titles for your Atlanta Braves.
We were able to put together that run of 14 consecutive division championships with a blend of a lot of new players coming from a lot of different places, and Bobby was always able to put them on the field as winners.
Great year, boys! Way to go, Berkey! Yeah!
And in the midst of that run, he led the Braves to their first World Series championship in almost 40 years.
The team of the 90s has its World Championship.
In a career that has now spanned 4 decades and featured more than 2,400 wins, perhaps his greatest legacy is this.
All you need to know about Bobby is that everybody in the game wants to play for Bobby at some point in time.
Right on him, kid! Come on! Now, Rossi!
He's the epitome of a player's manager. You know, basically he asks that you show up on time, you play hard, and you respect the game when you go out there on the field.
That's the definition of a baseball lifer. Bobby Cox knows no other way.
Bobby's got his spikes on and he's in full uniform at noontime for a 7 o'clock game. He lives, eats, drinks, and breathes the game of baseball, and that's what the best do.
And while Cox is second among active managers in wins, our next skipper is first.
Yes, sir. All right, let's go. Come on, that one run. Attaboy.
Tony La Russa has compiled quite a resume with 3 different teams, thanks in part to his uncanny instincts.
He was a tremendous manager to play for. He would walk around the field every day. He'd be like, Tony, what are you doing? I'm smelling. Smelling what? Smelling the grass? No. He said, I'm just smelling to see what attitude our team is.
He is an innovator. I mean, he's tried a lot of different things, whether it's bat the pitcher 8th.
Nobody utilizes the players better than he does. He puts people in a position where they have the best chance to succeed.
That approach has given Tony a reputation for turning franchises around. It began in Chicago in '79, and 4 years later, he led the White Sox to their first playoff appearance in 24 years. It was then on to Oakland, where the A's had been to the playoffs just once in the last 11 years.
Come on, Tony, again!
But beginning in 1988, La Russa led them to 3 straight World Series appearances, winning it all in '89.
Yes, he's there in time, and the A's are the world champions.
Come '96, Tony moved on to St. Louis, and in his first season there, the Cardinals broke an 8-year playoff drought.
Tony La Russa, they brought him here to get into the World Series.
And in 2006, he led them to the top.
For the first time since 1982, St. Louis has a World Series winner.
Wherever Tony La Russa has gone, he's won. With more than 2,500 wins and counting, He has the third highest total of all time.
You have a responsibility to get clubs in position to win. You give your best every day and try to do that with your club. And look in the mirror after it's over and say, that's my best.
Tony always seems to be serious. Our next skipper, not so much.
There's some folks who laugh at Casey Stengel because of the way he uses the English language.
The big thing is to have it on your mind you're going to win every day, and at the end of the season you generally win more games than which you'd expected to lose.
Charles Dillon Casey Stengel was a World Series star as a player and a 7-time champion as a manager. But he'll also be remembered as one of the great characters in the game.
Many people did view Casey as a clown, but he was brilliant.
Stengel was in fact a student of the game, having learned under the tutelage of the great John McGraw while playing for the New York Giants. But once Casey started managing in 1934, he struggled, first in Brooklyn with the Dodgers, then with Boston's National League team.
He was kicked out of a couple of places and kicked out resoundingly.
But when Casey took over the helm of the Yankees in 1949, he immediately led them to a championship.
Manager Casey Stengel is deliriously happy with his first major league title.
What managing the Yankees did was really unveil the real Casey Stengel.
Casey was the right man for these Yankees, a team laden with stars, for he knew precisely what buttons to push and when.
Casey was a brilliant manipulator of players. When the team was going badly, Casey never criticized them, just left them alone. When the team was going well, Casey rode them unmercifully.
And they responded with 5 consecutive World Series titles from 49 through 53, a feat that has gone unmatched in baseball history.
A proud Yankee day. For the first time, a team had hoisted 5 consecutive World Championship flags.
During Stengel's 12 seasons as the Yankees manager, he led them to an astonishing 10 pennants and 7 World Championships, tied for the most ever by any manager. And it's safe to say that no one had more fun doing what he did best than Casey.
I want to thank you for giving me this great send-off and the honor of being what I was, but I want to thank every one of the ball players. They did the job.
We now return to Prime 9, where this week we're featuring the top 9 managers in all of baseball. These are men who have not only stood the test of time in the major leagues, but have produced winning teams along the way. So now it's time for number 1 and 2, the greatest managers in the history of the game. We begin with number 2. Joe McCarthy would eventually become a Hall of Fame manager, but early on, the fact that he never played in the majors made him an easy target.
He was scorned, even hated, by players and press because he came to the big leagues with only a minor league background.
When you were playing in Toledo and I was playing in Louisville, little did we think that we were going to be here.
McCarthy had already won a pennant with the Cubs, but some Yankees still resented him, especially the biggest one of all.
Babe Ruth wanted to be the manager when McCarthy was named Yankees manager.
But Ruth was a free spirit. The Yankees needed a leader, and Joe molded the team in his image.
Joe McCarthy was a man of discipline. He disciplined himself, and he had rules for the ball club that he liked to have followed. He played along with what he wanted. Why, there was nothing he wouldn't do for you.
McCarthy brought a rare combination of talents to the job.
He was a technician of the old school, and he was going to extract value and performance from his players whether they liked him or not.
And he would be very, very clever about matchups, which is always an important part of baseball.
Well, it obviously worked, as McCarthy's Yankee teams won 7 World Series titles, including 4 in a row.
The Yankees of Joe McCarthy between 1936 and 39 not only won 4 consecutive World Series, they made a shambles out of the National League of opposition.
And I'll say one thing for you. You've done a great job as manager, and you've got a great ball club.
One that went 204 games over 500 during that 4-year span. McCarthy finished his career with more than 2,100 wins and loads of respect.
He's a very good fellow.
He was just such a smart baseball personality that he maximized every player's ability, including his own as a leader.
Which brings us to a leader with the most distinct style.
McGraw was a psychopath. John McGraw came from a horrific family background, and it was reflected in the way he approached daily life.
During McGraw's early playing days in Baltimore, he played for Ned Hanlon, who brought an innovative approach to the game. That style was adopted and refined by McGraw, who became the Giants' manager in 1902.
The way he managed the game was to take Ned Hanlon's tricky style of play, which he had learned in Baltimore, and add an element of aggression to it.
And it was life and death to him, and that's what winning in a baseball game was all about.
McGraw was a brilliant manipulator of players. In his own words, an absolute czar.
He was a master tactician. He ruled his players with an iron hand.
He was nicknamed the Little Napoleon because he was a martinet. He was a dictator.
The Giants took on McGraw's personality and played the game with an outlandish swagger, best symbolized by McGraw's decision to have the words "World Champions" sewn onto their jerseys after they won it all in 1905.
And so when the Giants got into a close pennant race, there was an awful lot of passion. He liked to stir up the opposition.
During his 31 years as manager of the Giants, McGraw's tactics won him 10 pennants.
I think McGraw did not change his style, even into the 1920s. He scorned the home run game that Babe Ruth brought in.
And John reveled when those two divergent styles came head-to-head in a pair of fall classics.
It was delicious for him to face off against Ruth's Yankees in the World Series in 1921 and 1922 and cut them to ribbons. Ruth hit 118 in one of those World Series because McGraw instructed his pitchers to throw nothing but curves. Don't throw a fastball, Ruth will get himself out.
John's approach was often abrasive and always brilliant. He won more than 2,700 games, second most ever, and finished a record-high 815 games over 500.
The idea was to win. Nothing else mattered. It didn't matter to be a nice guy. It didn't matter to get along with your players, and it certainly didn't matter to be liked by the opposing team. And he represented that really hard-nosed personality that I think was unique in those days and probably is unique today.
Well, we've managed to run out of time, but before we go, consider this. John McGraw managed Casey Stengel, and when Stengel led the Yankees, he had a player named Billy Martin who became known as Casey's boy. Stengel loved Martin's fiery passion, and Billy went on to become a brilliant skipper. He managed 5 different franchises in his career, including a bizarre off-and-on stint with the New York Yankees, in which he was hired by George Steinbrenner 5 different times.
That's not the way it's going to be, George. Well, you're damn right it is, and if you don't like it, you're fired. You haven't hired me yet.
But while Billy was great at turning teams around and making them successful, the fire that fueled his passion resulted in short stints.
Don't you be intimidating me.
And that got him tossed from this show. Well, that's our Prime 9. What's yours?